figure drawing and life drawing so long before we get into some anatomy, we're not going to go super deep because we've only got these short lessons, and I want to keep it fun as well and not just boring. Any one of us can get an anatomy book and copy out skeletons and muscles and insertion points. So I'm going to try to just keep it, that's why I've called it anatomy bites, because we're just going to do these little bits, and I was going to start with the skull and the head and everything and work our way down, but then I thought that's not how I draw. As I keep saying, I like working from the center of mass outwards, and that's often the hips, especially if it's a female model. So I thought, let's start with the hips. And I thought in each of these, we can do a little bit of sketching from skeleton and from muscle, or a combination of both. And then we'll connect it with drawing part of a life model, where we can then, with the skeleton and the muscles in our mind, we can then see what it looks like on a model. So just to give you an idea of what we're going to do here, we've got the skeleton, and I thought this is a brilliant view. It's perfect because it's not just front on or profile. It's just at that 3/4 that we can see the 3D shapes and where they're sort of going and what direction they're pointing in. Then we've got a side view showing some of the muscle insertion points. So I thought it's always important, if you just draw skeletons without any idea of where muscles connect, it's limited in how useful it is. So here we've got some of the muscles anyway. And then I thought we could just do 2 quick model sections, and we'll tie that into where that hip bone is and where that top of the femur is on this one, and this one here as well. It's quite prominent in this one. So yeah, my goal is to just do enough anatomy in these little lessons that when you're drawing the figure, you're looking for those landmarks, and that can be really helpful. Sometimes in a model, these little landmarks of bone and muscle are not always that clear, and sometimes you can improve your drawing by putting them in there where they might not even be there in real life. And masters of figure drawing do that all the time. I've seen that a lot. So yeah, this should be pretty relaxed. I'm not going to talk through too much as we go here. I kind of just want to sketch this skeleton and then sketch the following view. And then I'll probably talk a bit more when we draw from those models. Now, when drawing skeletons, it can look a bit confusing. There's a lot of detail everywhere. So just remember to break things down into simple shapes. So like I would suggest with this one, if we look at this simple heart shape I'm drawing on the photo here, start with that, and then we can build out from there. So that's what I would recommend. So let's just, I'll try keep an eye on the time here, but let's just sketch this view over the next sort of 5 to 8 minutes or so. Try to get that curving direction of the tailbone there. I remember someone saying once, I can't remember where I read it, but they said that these hip bones, they sort of form a basin. I feel like that's accurate, especially as I draw this. It's a good way to think of it when you're trying to model the 3-dimensional shape in your mind. The important parts that we're sort of looking at when it relates to figure drawing is that iliac crest, the top of the hip bone there, that curving shape at the top and the top of the femur, where that protrudes outside of the ball and socket joint. So try not to get lost in too much detail here, just focus on overall shapes if you can, because we will only have another minute or two on this. All right. Sorry, that is kind of fast, but we've got to keep moving, so we'll just keep these as light sketches. Main thing is that we just get in our minds this idea of these crests and this big protrusion at the top of the femur there, because what we want to think about is which parts show up on the surface of the skin. So let's just do a very quick sketch of this side view, keeping in mind now, if you can keep the 3D model in your mind of what we've just drawn, the 3/4 view of the bones. Now keep that in your mind as you sketch this. Pretend that we've just rotated around to the left a bit more. And we can see that tailbone curving forward on the left and that iliac crest at the top. And now we've got some muscles joining that down to the top of the femur. So that little blue highlight in the image, that's showing that ball and socket insertion right there. The leg actually joins the hip. Might be a good idea to actually sketch the outline of the body that we've got in this reference here, because that'll help us to start connecting all this anatomy with the actual exterior form. I'm going to put some of the shading on the bones here because it feels like that's the only way we'll get a real sense of the 3D forms at play here. Like we want to show that that top of the femur is protruding outwards and showing the light catching the top of it, and then the little indentation below that in shadow is a good way to do that. All right, but we will stop this one soon and we'll have a look at the models after this.
That would be good. This one is so complicated, so much more complicated than the models.
Yeah, drawing anatomy is difficult. I think when drawing anatomy, even more so than doing normal figure drawing, you have to start breaking everything down into big shapes and sketch it lightly as big, simple shapes first, and then go in and put detail. Otherwise, it's too easy to lose track of proportion. Alrighty, let's have a look at the first model. So let's just go back first and just look at our first one. So the key things that at least that I think about when I'm figure drawing when it comes to the hips is, as I said, this area here and this area here. And these are the two surface landmarks that we're going to be looking at in these models. So, and then on this drawing, it's got those two spots here and here. And yeah, really when I am figure drawing, I'm looking for those two landmarks, especially when I'm working from the hips outwards. So here we have a male model, and that iliac crest right there. Top of the femur is here. And it's interesting to note that it's hard to tell, but that highlight on the skin right here, that looks like it's highlighting the top of the iliac crest, the top of that hip bone there. I believe that's what that is. And certainly this highlight here, all of that is caused by the direction of the plane that's created by the bone up near the surface, hitting up against the surface of the skin. So we've got some time, so let's take our time and sketch this, focusing on those landmarks. Now, as I say, it's not a great idea to start with detail and then try to work it out from there. So feel free to block in major shapes first. I'm going to do that. Like I'm going to actually put in sort of just a rough shape here to act as a landmark to make sure I don't mess up proportions. We want to get in the angle of the hips, which we can see is slightly up on the right. So I want to get all that stuff in before I get lost in the detail of the anatomy. I'm trying to remember, especially in male models, I'll just bring up my other anatomy charts because there's another lump above the top of the iliac crest here, and that's not bone, that's muscle. Yes, it's the external obliques. So this lump, I'll just mark them on the photo. That's part of the obliques. I believe this here is the iliac crest, and here is the femur. And we're not seeing any of those landmarks on the left. That's all muscle. We're not seeing the surface areas on the left that where the bone is up against the skin. So I guess to make this anatomy study practical, I guess it is a good idea to actually think of those three things, not just the two, not just the femur and the iliac crest, but that little lump of the external oblique above that. And obviously that changes. If the model's got more fat on them, you're not going to see that as much as the bone landmarks, but if they haven't got too much fat on them, you can see those obliques as well. So we can get into some shading here as well to help us see the anatomy. Got about 2 to 3 more minutes left on this one. So it's interesting, isn't it? Without knowing the anatomy, without having the shape of the hip bone in your mind when you're drawing these models, you might easily miss something like that highlight, that subtle highlight there on the hip there. And yet when you're when you are figure drawing, especially I find with when I'm drawing with charcoal, if you're aware of landmarks like that and you bother to just take a split second to put them in, it can really make the drawing sing a lot better than if that's just overlooked. So that's the point of learning a little bit about the anatomy. One of the points anyway. All right, we better move on to the last one because we've got just under 10 minutes to go. So that's interesting though. All right, so fiddling. So this one, interesting for the same reason, because we can actually see the curve of that iliac crest on this one. See right here? Oops, why can't I draw on this? Just one sec. Oh, I see what. Here we go. So there we have the curve of that right there. And I'm trying to ID, but I think the femur, top of the femur is right here. And so there's those landmarks, and having sketched the actual bone, we now know what that means, what that is. So I'll just delete that. And let's have a little draw of this section. Try not to get lost in the rest of the body up the top. Forget about that if you can, or at least leave it until you've drawn and rendered this area really closely so that you can focus on it. We can even use the anatomy as part of our sort of basic shape making at the start of the sketch. Feel free to actually draw the anatomy in, like as in you can draw in what's not necessarily there in the photo. Just put a straight circle where that femur is as a landmark. The funny thing is when you do figure drawing, if you actually sketch in anatomy, it often makes the drawing look cooler. As I say, I've noticed time and time again that people who are very good at drawing the figure, when they go to life drawing, even if the model is not showing up a lot of the landmarks the artist will put them in anyway, and that's how you get that old master style look to your figure drawings, by actually knowing the anatomy. I don't claim to be there myself at all. I'm at the beginning of that, but it's something I'm always trying to improve. And the tough thing with anatomy is that I've done plenty of sketching from anatomy books, but if you don't tie it back to how it comes up on the surface in reality, it can be difficult to make the connection, and that's why I decided to structure these lessons that way, rather than us just sketching from anatomy images. Are you working digitally, Olga?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun.
How's it going? You've had that for a few weeks now. Like, how's it feel drawing on it?
I am getting so much more used to it now. I found it really has made me think about the way I approach art, and I can experiment a lot easier. So it's been really fun.
Yeah, cool. Are you using Procreate?
Yes, Procreate.
How much do you pay for it?
Procreate, I think, is only like $15 or something, and it's a one-off.
Right.
Yeah, cheap.
Yeah, I think
That's
it's
not
pretty
bad.
cheap.
Yeah. And do you get a stylus, or can you just draw with finger?
It's better. Yeah, getting a stylus to draw with is much better. You can draw with a finger though. If you go to Apple, it's quite expensive, but that's what I did because it's compatible with all my computers. But you can get like a cheaper tablets. Like Samsung is pretty good from what I hear.
That's good.
Oh, is that right? I thought you had to have an iPad to use Procreate. I thought it was only on the iPad. Is that not true? Not the case?
Oh, I'll look into it, but I thought it was available on other, I thought it was available on Android as well. I'll have to check.
It probably is by now, to be honest. I haven't checked either. I'm thinking of like when it first came out, I think it was only on iPad, but it makes sense. It's very popular now, so I'd be surprised if it wasn't on Android and everything as well.
Yeah, well, the good thing about Procreate is it's really easy it was very easy for me to understand it as someone who came from a traditional art background. It's the way it's structured. It's really really easy to get the hang of it.
Right. How do you find the screen size? Like, do you find that does it feel like you've got enough, room to sort of see what you're drawing? Like, that makes sense. I'm just asking because I'm drawing here on a 22-inch like Cintiq, so it's just I struggle to imagine what it would be like drawing on a tablet.
It's like drawing on an A5 piece of paper because my tablet is quite small. But you get used to it. I think like once I get the hang of it, I'll probably try and look for a bigger tablet. But for now, it's pretty good.
Yeah,
Cool.
well, that's good. It will save some art supplies for sure, I think.
No, just waste electricity.
Yeah.
All right, the video is probably gonna cut out any time now, but yeah, I hope that was useful. I think that I actually found that really fun, like doing not only anatomy studies, but then connecting it to photos. I find that kind of useful. And I think if we keep doing that and working our way out from the center of mass like this and looking at the anatomy landmarks, the ones that show up often on the surface, yeah, I think we could learn a lot and it will improve our figure drawing. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that.
Great.
Thank you. It was really good.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Dylan.
No worries. I'm just going to keep sketching till this cuts out.
Yeah.